The Star Wars sequels are notorious for not being well thought out or well written, and if there's one thing that they do well, it's create plot holes. Over and over again, things happen within the sequel trilogy that, at best, make no sense and don't work with the already established lore of Star Wars, and at worst, actively go against the established lore and break the canon of Star Wars that we all know and love. So in this video, I found the 10 worst plot holes that the sequel trilogy created, and we're going to be ranking them from best to worst. And when I say best to worst, I mean like least lore breaking to most lore breaking. Obviously, there's no like good plot holes, so best, you know what I'm talking about, best to worst. Narrowing it down to just 10 was hard enough as it is because there were just so many, but without further ado, let's get into it. And at number 10, we have the creation and existence of the Final Order fleet on Exegol. Basically, Kylo Ren shows up on a secret Sith planet that no one should ever have been able to find without a special wayfinder, and there he meets Emperor Palpatine, who has returned from the dead. You know, we're like 45 seconds in and we're off to a great start, Disney. You love to see it. Hey, good job, guys. You did good. Emperor Palpatine's back. Awesome. Love to see it. And don't you worry, this is not the last time that we see Palpatine in this video. No, sir. Anyway, Palpatine reveals to Kylo Ren that not only is he back in black, shout out AC/DC, but he's also created an entire fleet of Star Destroyers, each one with a mini Death Star laser that can destroy a planet attached underneath. And when I say fleet, I mean thousands and thousands of these bad boys. This just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I actually made a whole video about just this topic a couple months ago, but for the sake of this video, I'll go over the big points for you. First of all, who the heck made this fleet? Exegol is supposed to be unable to be located by anyone, unless you have one of two very specific wayfinders that exist. So how did all these Imperial lackeys get here to build these thousands and thousands of massive warships? And second, how do each of these massive warships have a freaking Death Star laser attached underneath? I just finished watching Andor Season 2, and great show by the way, great season of Star Wars, but in the show, the Death Star is like the biggest deal ever to these people. They're like, holy cow, the Empire has the ability to blow up a planet, and we need to do something about this. We need to destroy this weapon at any cost, because it's that big of a deal. But now, in The Rise of Skywalker, blowing up a planet has become so cliched and normal that they're just like, oh yeah, there's this fleet of Star Destroyers, and by the way, they can all blow up a planet. And now who wants coffee? I'm making a donkey's run. This just makes being able to destroy a planet so easy, and it actually loses all the weight that it ever had. But from beginning to end, this whole situation is just a massive plot hole. And now the reason it's not higher on the list is partially because technically this could be explained. Not well, mind you, but you could say, oh, well, the Star Destroyers were built by Imperial officers who were on Exegol for years and never left after the Empire fell. And the reason that the Star Destroyers can blow up a planet is because technology got better. They never explain that in The Rise of Skywalker, but an argument could technically be made, even though it does kind of suck and still not make that much sense. Regardless, that's the Final Order fleet, and let's move on to number 9. At number 9, we have the Knights of Ren being talked about a whole bunch, but almost never actually explained or used. Basically, the Knights of Ren are like Kylo Ren's boy band that helped him destroy Luke's Jedi Temple back in the day, and now they just like, I don't know, give him breakfast in bed or something. That's the point. I don't know what they do. Like, what is their role? They're referenced and shown a couple times throughout the trilogy, and it's implied that they like helped Kylo Ren complete his turn to the dark side, and then he became their leader. But the problem is that we never once actually see them doing anything important at all, and we're never told who they are or what their purpose is. They show up in a few flashbacks, and then in The Rise of Skywalker, they literally, and I'm not joking, show up for like 4 scenes max, or a farm throughout all those scenes, never do anything, and then get killed by Kylo Ren as soon as it's convenient for the script, and that's it. That's the end of them. It's almost like J.J. Abrams was writing his script for the movie and he remembered that these guys exist and he's like, you know what? Throw them in the movie. Give them a little screen time. Give them their time to shine. And then halfway through the movie, he was like, you know what? I think planet-destroying Star Destroyers are cooler. Screw those guys. And that's the end of them. Who are the Knights of Ren? What do they do? Who do they serve? Why are they here? Do they have any significance at all to the broader plot? I guess we'll never know. Number 8. Number 8 is really straightforward. It's just Maz Kanata having Luke's old lightsaber. In The Force Awakens, she takes Rey and Han Solo downstairs and opens some old box, and lo and behold, sitting right at the top is Anakin Skywalker's old lightsaber, passed down to his son Luke by Obi-Wan. Naturally, Han Solo's like, yo, where the frick you get that? Because he hasn't seen that bad boy in like 30 years, and Maz just tells him that it's
a good question for another time.
And that's the end of it. Now, call me crazy, but I feel like the fans of Star Wars and the Jedi and Luke Skywalker, you know, the people who want to see this movie would have loved for you to explain right then and there how Maz Kanata has Luke Skywalker's lightsaber. What happened after it got cut off of Luke's hand in Cloud City? Did a civilian get it? Did Darth Vader get it? Was it collected by a bounty hunter? Did it fall into Maz's lap when she was practicing her Piccolo for the big recital on Thursday? I guess we'll never know. Without an explanation, it makes no sense at all that she would have it, and it makes lightsabers and other important items seem kind of less meaningful if random people could just get their hands on them willy-nilly. Like I said earlier, there's not a whole lot to this plot hole. It just doesn't make sense that Maz would have it, and she never explains how she ended up getting it. So, great writing, JJ. Great writing. Once again. Now, at number 7, this next plot hole is one that I don't hear get talked about very much, and it's actually very indicative of the difference between George Lucas's Star Wars and Disney's Star Wars. And it's that there are no consequences whatsoever for Rey killing Palpatine. And now, that might sound a little confusing, but just let me explain. Remember back in episode 6, Return of the Jedi, when Luke, Vader, and Palpatine are in the throne room together? One of the huge plot points in that scene is that Luke refuses to kill Palpatine, even when Palpatine tries to goad him into it, because he senses that killing Palpatine in hate and anger would turn him to the dark side too, like his father. Instead, Luke throws away his lightsaber dramatically and declares himself a Jedi, like his father before him, and in doing so, turns Anakin back to the light side, which leads to Anakin killing Palpatine and fulfilling the prophecy. Bada bing, bada boom, what a great ending. What a phenomenal ending to a great arc. You know, it would be a shame if like 40 years later, it was completely undone by some random—
Confirms the worst. Somehow Palpatine returned.
Anyway, but when Rey is fighting Palpatine all these years later, she ends up killing him in rage and anger, and yet in doing so, does not turn to the dark side or even experience any real temptation to do so. This completely goes against the earlier themes of anger and hate corrupting, and doesn't line up at all with the lore that was established literally decades earlier. Also, leading up to this, the movie kind of hints that if Rey were to kill Palpatine, then his spirit would possess her because, you know, she's his granddaughter and the rule of two must be preserved and all that, but that just doesn't end up happening and isn't talked about again. This whole concept of restraint, control, doing the right thing, and the power that our choices have on our internal light and darkness is something that George Lucas really cared about and put a lot of thought into, but that Disney clearly didn't and thought wasn't important enough to really dive into or explain. And that's why I think this is the 7th worst plot hole that the sequels created. Now, at this point, the plot holes are getting pretty bad, and they're only going to get worse the farther up this list we move. But at number 6, we have the First Order's very existence. Where the heck did the First Order come from? Seriously, just from me watching the movies alone, you would never know how the First Order came into existence a mere 30 years after the Empire fell. From what we know about the movies, at the time of The Force Awakens, there's a broader New Republic that's been formed and been running for decades now, and even though they never really specify, they kind of hint that the First Order is like a terrorist faction that operates in the outer rim of the galaxy. If that is the case, then why does the New Republic let them? Where do they get their funding and members? Who started it? And how did the New Republic not know about Starkiller Base? Because when Starkiller Base is ready, the first thing they do is say that this is the end of the New Republic, which kind of implies that the New Republic is way more established and powerful than the First Order, and then the First Order blows up like 5 planets that are apparently the bigger planets of the New Republic. Why did the New Republic not anticipate something like this happening, and why did they not declare all-out war on the First Order years ago? Oh, so they care enough to send Princess Leia and a few measly X-Wings, but heavens forbid that the entire New Republic military might fights the enemy that wants to obliterate them and everything they stand for. No matter which way you slice it, it doesn't make sense how the First Order came into existence and became so powerful, and it completely takes away from how important it was that the Rebel Alliance beats the Empire 3 decades earlier. And I'm sure that one of you guys in the comments is going to have read some obscure third-party book that explains exactly how the First Order rose from the ashes of the Empire in the very face of the New Republic. And hey, good for you, genuinely, I'm glad you have an interest in that. But I shouldn't have to read a third-party book to understand the basic premise of the movie. And not just the movie, the most legendary continuation of films of the most legendary franchise of all time. This is Star Wars. I shouldn't have to read a third-party book to understand just the sheer concept. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Even though there are worse plot holes, lore-wise, that we're gonna get to, this one just makes me mad. I just hate how bad the writing is. But regardless, let's move on. At number 5, this is the first one that's actually directly about Rey, and I'm sure that some of you have been waiting for this one because it's a pretty well-known plot hole. However, I personally have been waiting for something else, and not just for Noah Khan to drop his new album. Although Noah, first of all, if you're watching, leave a comment so I know you're a fan. That's awesome. Second, please drop the album. We need new music. I need new music. But that's not what I'm waiting for. What I'm actually waiting for is for you boys to hit that subscribe button. Boys, only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. And it would really help me out, and I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe if you're enjoying the video so far. Thank you so much. And now let's get back to plot hole number 5. And number 5 is Rey's ability to use the Force in really advanced ways right off the bat. Rey learns what the Force is from Han Solo, or at least learns that it's actually real, and then within the next 2 days, with absolutely no training or understanding of what she's doing at all, she uses a Jedi mind trick to get a guard to unlock her from her restraints, and uses the Force to pull a lightsaber to her instead of Kylo Ren. It goes without saying that being able to do this out of nowhere is kind of insane, and if this can be done so easily, then it makes the entire concept of, oh I don't know, training your whole life from a very young age like the Jedi do back in the day, kinda silly. Now you might be saying to yourself, Jedward, you smoldering scallywag, and you wouldn't really be- I can't even do that with a straight face. Now you might be saying to yourself, Jedward, didn't Anakin and Luke both do something similar right after they learned that they had the Force too? And the answer to that, my dear viewer, is yes and no. First, Anakin was already an exceptional pilot at a very young age and had incredible reflexes which allowed him to blow up the Trade Federation command ship. The Force didn't play that big of a role in that. He was just a good pilot. Yeah, granted, maybe with the help of the Force, but in general, for a young guy, he was a very good pilot. And as for Luke, first of all, I just want to clarify that on this channel, you can go back, I have always said that it is a little bit of a Mary Sue moment when Luke is able to blow up the Death Star with the Force after he just learns he had it. I've always said that, but it's not as much as Rey. And also, on top of that, yes, Luke did use the Force to blow up the Death Star, but that was a much lesser use of the Force, and all he had to do was reach out and feel for the right moment to fire. Presumably a lot easier than actively mind controlling a stormtrooper or pulling a lightsaber to you through the snow. I wouldn't totally disagree that both Anakin and Luke do have kind of a Mary Sue moment here, to a lesser extent, but Rey being so strong with the Force and able to use such, abilities that require so much strength and training right off the bat is genuinely a plot hole. There's no other way to put it. I know, they kind of retconned her to be Palpatine's granddaughter, which was an attempt to explain how she was able to do that so quick, but clearly that wasn't the original intention, and JJ let the cat out of the bag and just made her super strong right off the bat. So that's what my thoughts are, that's my opinion, and now on to number 4. For the 4th biggest plot hole that the sequel trilogy introduced, we have the confusing mess that was Supreme Leader Snoke. In The Force Awakens, he really does seem like he's gonna be the big bad guy for the trilogy. But then in literally the next film, Rian Johnson kills him off out of nowhere, cause, it's better storytelling to subvert the audience expectations than, oh, I don't know, have the main villain live. Come on, Ryan, what are we doing? But then in the next movie, we see a bunch of weird Snoke clones in some green mucus on Exegol, and Palpatine tells Kylo Ren that Snoke was his puppet that he was using to control the First Order. But was Snoke supposed to be a clone of Palpatine or some other figure close to him? I mean, he was definitely powerful in the Force, and he had been known far and wide throughout the galaxy. Remember Han Solo telling Leia that Snoke turned Ben Solo to the dark side in The Force Awakens? But now, all of a sudden, none of that matters, and Snoke was always a nothing burger? Like, what was the goal here, Ryan? What were you gonna do? The lack of proper planning and execution here is so obvious that it is straight up embarrassing. If you're gonna have your central villain for 2 movies be formidable and intimidating, we have to know a little bit about him, and eventually, hopefully, his whole story. Totally botched. And the worst part was that I liked Snoke as a big bad guy in The Force Awakens. I genuinely thought he'd be a good substitution for what Palpatine had been in the original trilogy. He was big, he was strong, he was intimidating, he was super powerful with the Force in The Last Jedi. I was interested. You had me, Ryan. I was hooked. What is there to say? Alright, we're in the top 3 now, and if you've been keeping track in your head, you probably have some idea what these 3 plot holes are gonna be, because these are some of the biggest plot holes, not just in the sequel trilogy, but in Star Wars overall. And at number 3, we have Princess Leia flying through space. Basically, some TIE fighters blow up the command center of her ship, and when it explodes, it sucks her into the vacuum of space, where she sits for like 3 minutes. But then, some soft, uplifting music starts to play, and she opens her eyes, her frozen fingers thaw out and crack back to life, and she flies back to the ship like Superman, hand outstretched and everything. This is an insane ability, and no one in Star Wars has ever used the Force to be able to do anything like this. Even for Jedi, with the possible exception of Plo Koon, space is an arena where you don't dare venture. The Force can't keep you alive in the cold, dark, dead vacuum of space. It couldn't even keep Mace Windu alive when he fell like 500 feet. And then, in The Rise of Skywalker, J.J. Abrams tried to retcon her so that Leia had used to be a Jedi back in the day, but then quit training out of nowhere for basically no reason, to explain why she wasn't a Jedi in the first 2 sequels, because he thought that maybe that would explain how she flew through space and survived. But all it ended up doing was making her story way more convoluted and sporadic, because, again, being a Jedi doesn't mean that you can just survive in space. This plot hole pisses me off more than other ones because to me, it genuinely feels just disrespectful. Like, the abilities that the Force has been established to give Jedi and Sith and other Force users make sense for what an invisible energy field would do for you. Like, foresight, telekinesis, mind control, those all make sense for an invisible energy field to bestow upon you. But surviving in space, how would the Force even do that? It just doesn't go in the realm of comprehension. It's just so... there's not even how much I can say. We all know this is really stupid, like, right? Like, we can agree on that. So let's move on to number 2. At number 2, for the second worst plot hole that the sequels introduced, we have somehow Palpatine returned. I don't even have to explain what I mean. This is by far one of the most lore-breaking things to come out of the Star Wars universe. The fact that the big bad guy of 6 Star Wars movies, the man that Anakin Skywalker killed in order to bring balance to the Force, as foretold by the prophecy of the Chosen One, just came back out of nowhere. Willy-nilly, he just came back. Somehow he returned. No explanation, not even an attempt to explain how he survived falling 1,000 feet on an exploding Death Star, and to top it all off, Palpatine's return was announced in a Fortnite event. A Fortnite event! No, I am not joking. That was the medium that Disney first chose to broadcast this through. It's genuinely just disrespectful and a spit in the face to the fans, the first 8 movies, the Skywalker saga, and the legacy of Star Wars. One of the most well-known and hated plot holes in all of Star Wars, and for good reason. The question does beg itself though, if this plot hole isn't the worst in the Star Wars sequels, which one is? What could possibly be worse than Emperor Palpatine returning from the dead with no explanation and announced in a game of Fortnite Battle Royale? How do you trump that one? Well, this might be a hot take, and maybe some of you would have put somehow Palpatine has returned above this, and you know what, I can't blame you at all. To me, they're almost interchangeable, but in my opinion, the worst plot hole in all of Star Wars, and especially the sequel trilogy, is the Holdo Maneuver. The idea that going into hyperspace will automatically destroy a much bigger object completely makes so much of Star Wars useless and pointless. Like, why wasn't this used on the Death Star, or the second one, or Star Destroyers, or, Trade Federation ships? It makes no sense in the context of Star Wars. Our boy Ryan did it again, but I actually made a whole video explaining why this scene is so bad and why Admiral Holdo is such a terrible character, and you can watch that right here. I really think you should check it out. It's a good video. I'm very proud of it, and thanks for watching, boys. Have a good one. I'll see you later. Have a good day. Bye.